For those of you who I don't know, I'm Tom Farrell. I'm the Chief Advancement Officer for the university. I'm also a double graduate from the U of R, so class 1988 and a master's degree from the Great Warner School in 1990. It's a great pleasure to be here. We've got a great turnout. And I just wanted to say a couple things before Judy comes up in just a second. We have 3 gift recognition societies at Rochester. We have the, I would say, famous George Eastman Circle, which I'm sure many of you are members of, and if the chair people of the George Eastman Circle were here today, they'd say you all should be members of the George Eastman Circle, but that's been an incredibly successful program. We have our Rochester Loyal program, which we put together a few years ago, and that recognizes all the people that make annual gifts on a continuous basis. That's an important program. And then, of course, we have the Wilson Society, which is an absolutely remarkable and wonderful program, very beneficial to the institution that we put together a few years ago. And I was looking yesterday, I'm very much into the history of the U of R, and I was looking up Joe Wilson, who I've come to admire a lot. Of course, I've always known about Joe Wilson, but he was a 1931 U of R graduate, a legendary Rochester leader, and also a legendary trustee and chairman of the board. He was someone who was known as one of the pioneers of servant leadership, a man of tremendous character, and really deep commitment to this community, a very special Rochester person and a very fitting namesake for this important program. He actually passed away young. He was 61 years old, which is younger than I am. And he was at a lunch with Nelson Rockefeller. Rockefeller was governor at the time, and Wilson was in New York. He invited Joe Wilson to his apartment for lunch, and Joe Wilson passed away at that lunch. But just a remarkable person who was at the highest levels of this country's leadership, which is why I mentioned the Rockefeller connection. I came up today, I wasn't on the program, but I wanted to thank Judy Ricker for taking on leadership of the Wilson Society. I've known Raymond and Judy for quite a while. We've had the program under the leadership of our former trustee, Janice Willett, for many years, but Judy's now stepping in, and I wanted to thank her from a university perspective for doing this. And I'm going to introduce her quickly, which is, and I learned a lot about you, Judy, as I was saying when I read your bio, which is unbelievable. I didn't know you had all this stuff, but two degrees from the U of R, I believe, degrees from the Eastman School and the Simon School of Business, played oboe with the RPO for 15 years, taught at Nazareth and Hochstein, also an adjunct faculty member at the Eastman School of Music, and a very distinguished and award-winning career in advertising, brand, and marketing activity. And also, I would just say last, Judy is married to Raymond, who many of us know and is an emeritus professor of saxophone at the Eastman School of Music and former senior associate dean of professional studies at Eastman. So we get, I think, 2 for 1 here. So Judy, please come up and accept our thanks for this. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. As Tom shared, my name is Judy Ricker, and I'm delighted to be here on this gorgeous Rochester day, wow, with my husband Ray and with all of you. Ray and I have been committed to the university since we were students benefiting from scholarships. And we're proud founding members of the Wilson Society, of this growing community that the Wilson Society is. And I'm really honored to be the new chair. And I said to Janice Willett, she's got big shoes to fill, so I'm really honored. As you know, recognizing the university as part of your legacy ensures the future of this institution that we all love. We're pleased to have so many Wilson Society members with us today, as well as special friends, university leaders, faculty, and of course our featured speaker, Dr. David Linehan and his wife Janice. Thank you all for being here. Now, I have a lot of well-deserved thank yous to give in the next 3.5 minutes. I did time this. But first, let's give it up for the Maple Quartet from the Eastman School of Music. Okay, now I think Isabel, Magali, John, and Gabriel are on to their next gig. Okay, so they're not joining us for lunch. But, you know, I know what it takes to do what they do. And I'm sure we all appreciate them sharing their talents and hard work today, you know, as we were chatting in the other room. You know, and they are why we're here, right? Students like them and other students who are joining us today are ambassadors. So, special thanks to those university leaders and faculty who are here with us. Among them are Dr. Bradford C. Burke, Vice Chair of Research, Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation, and the Director of the University of Rochester Neurorestoration Institute, and former CEO of the University of Rochester Medical Center, and a Wilson Society member. Reverend Brian Kuhl, chaplain at the University of Rochester, and the J. Nelson and Joan Hoffman Director of the Catholic Newman Community, and a Wilson Society member. Stephen Dewhurst, Vice President for Research. Tom Farrell, who you just heard from, Senior Vice President for University Advancement. Sarah Jesse, the new Mary W. and Donald R. Clark Director of this gorgeous Memorial Art Gallery. Congratulations, Sarah. Okay. Lisa Kitko, Dean of the School of Nursing. Kate Sheeran, the new Joan and Martin Messinger, Dean of the Eastman School of Music. Congratulations, Kate, to you as well. And Dr. Mark Taubman, former CEO of the University of Rochester Medical Center and the Dean of the School of Medicine and Dentistry. Dr. Taubman is joined by his wife, Lois. The Taubmans are both Wilson Society members. So thank you all for your leadership and taking time to be with us today. I'd also like to recognize our Wilson Society ambassadors who are here with us, students. Ali Al-Sadi and Madison King, thank you so much for all you do. You want to raise your hands, guys? Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Now, just a little business before we enjoy our lunch. I am proud to report that we have more than 2,800 Wilson Society members. Yes. Okay. That's not all. In total, our members have given or pledged more than $920 million in estate commitments and more than $392 million in current use gifts for a total of $1.3 billion with a B dollars, okay? We're not only supporting the university today, but we're also helping to ensure its future. The impact of Wilson Society members reaches far and wide and is felt among the many university schools, units, departments, programs, and future students where members have chosen to designate their support. So we are deeply, deeply grateful to each of you for your visionary leadership and your partnership in helping ensure the university's future is not only ever better, but ever brighter, okay? And a special shout out to Christopher Ramey, Rosanna Chintani, and Emily Raleigh and their team for making it easy to personalize and design the perfect legacy approach for each of us and for making today's celebration possible. So thank you to you guys. I now have the distinct honor of introducing today's keynote speaker. Dr. Linehan serves as the CEO of the University of Rochester Medical Center, Dean of the School of Medicine and Dentistry, and Senior Vice President for Health Sciences. Forgive me if I'm going to read this because I don't want to make any mistakes, okay? So previously, he served as URMC's Department of Surgery Chair for 10 years. As a surgical oncologist, internationally renowned for his clinical innovation and research into new treatments for pancreatic cancer, Dr. Linehan guided URMC's Department of Surgery through a period of tremendous growth. Under his leadership, the surgical faculty flourished. He recruited more than 50 surgeons, bringing new talent and specialty services to Rochester. He attracted scientists and promoted the growth of surgeon scientists, securing millions in research funding. He attracted the best and the brightest trainees. continuing the Department of Surgery's legacy as a top-tier surgical training program. And he achieved significant fiscal improvements, incredibly impressive. So, President Sarah Mangelsdorf, who unfortunately could not be with us today, said of Dr. Linehan, quote, "Dr. Linehan has distinguished himself as one of the true stars of our clinical enterprise. He brings to the role of CEO and dean a vision for advancing the medical center, including the School of Medicine and Dentistry and School of Nursing, that draws on his outstanding track record of leadership and expertise as a physician, surgeon, researcher, and academic administrator. He's well poised to lead our world-class clinical operations and our nationally recognized medical school into the next chapters of success," unquote. We are honored to call Dr. Linehan and his wife Janice members of the Wilson Society. Thank you. And Dr. Linehan today will present on the future of the University of the Rochester Medical Center. And I know we are all so excited about what we've seen going on at the Medical Center in recent years. I know I'm not the only one looking forward to this presentation and your perspective and your expertise on this vital health resource and treasure for our community. So thank you, and please welcome Dr. Linehan.
Good afternoon, everybody. Somebody out there in the cocktail reception asked me, so how has your job changed, going from being the chair of surgery to the dean and CEO? And I said, well, one notable change is when I was the chair of surgery and a busy operative surgeon, I wasn't usually out drinking wine at noon on a weekday. There's no bar in the OR lounge, I can assure you. So I wanted to take the opportunity to raise a glass to all of you. It's remarkable what Judy told us, what this society has meant to the building of the University of Rochester. And I've been at a lot of academic medical centers, I've been at a lot of universities, and I've never seen the dedication of alums that you see here, and this room is a testament to it. So I want to raise a glass to all of you to thank you for your support. Hear, hear. All right, I'm not going back to the operating this afternoon. Okay, so I too, like Tom, when I see something, I want to know the history of it. So I too went back to look and learn more about Joe and Peggy Wilson. And it's really an amazing story when you think about it. And what I learned from my research is it was really George Eastman that set the ball rolling, but it was 50 years later in the mid-century where Joe and Peggy Wilson really accelerated Eastman's original vision. And the thing about Joe and Peggy Wilson is they had really bold vision for U of R, and you can see this in this slide. And when you talk about legacy, all you have to do is look around campus and see what Joe and Peggy Wilson did. There's many Wilson professorships that were funded. There's both at the Medical Center and the River Campus. There's the Wilson scholarships that were also funded. One of the things that I just learned about when the students just arrived on campus is the Wilson Day of Service. And how great is that? All the new students arrive in Rochester, and the first thing they do is they go out into the community and work on community service projects. And that's a testament to the Wilson's vision. There's also the Wilson recital piano, Kate, so they were big supporters of the arts, and also the Wilson Mag Fund, where they supported, and I think Peggy Wilson left her art collection to the Mag when she died. There's Wilson Boulevard on the campus, named by the city, which is the backbone through the campus. And there's also Wilson Commons. And Wilson Commons is that place where you can go in and feel the student energy. It's the gathering place for our River Campus students. So think about how their legacy lives on in so many ways. And we talk a lot now. This is like a core value of Sarah Mangelsdorf is this concept of one Rochester. One Rochester isn't a new concept, and you can tell that from the Wilson's legacy. They actually gave a total of more than $41 million in legacy giving by the year 1971, and if you do the math, that's more than $300 million. So it was Joe and Peggy Wilson's benevolence that makes the University of Rochester what it is today. So it's important for us to remember that. but it's all of you that are continuing that. I also am fortunate to have my two predecessors in the job here, Mark Taubman and his wife Lois, and Brad Burke and his wife Coral. And you know, it's not lost on me that I've been handed the keys to a Lamborghini. I mean, the work that Mark did and the vision that he had in the last 12 years, I'm seeing the fruits of that now. And he's been extremely gracious in his mentorship to me and his advice, as has been Brad. So I'm really fortunate to stand on the shoulders of giants that are there for me whenever I need them. One of when I think I talked to Mike about this, what do you want me to talk about? And he said, well, I want you to talk about your vision for the medical center. And so when you think about vision, what does that really mean? And to actually have a vision and to be able to implement it, you almost have to predict the future. It's like, you know, Wayne Gretzky said, it's not where the puck is, it's where it's going. So I thought a lot about that. What's healthcare going to look like 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now? And one of the things that, when I started thinking about that, I started thinking about Cy Schwartz. Lynn is here with us today. And Cy was an incredibly important mentor to me. He was on the faculty of the University of Rochester for 65 years. He was an absolutely world-renowned, internationally known surgeon. Every surgical trainee in the world knows who Seymour Schwartz is because he literally wrote the book, Schwartz's Principles of Surgery. So he was this iconic individual that had a huge impact on me and a huge impact on the medical center and the University of Rochester and the city of Rochester and the region and the American College of Surgeons, so national impact. And one of the things that we did is, and it was shortly before Cy died, I think a year or two before he died, is we had a symposium at the American College of Surgeons. I believe it was in San Francisco. And the organizer of the meeting called me and said, it's the 50th anniversary of Schwartz's Principles of Surgery. We need to do something about that 50th anniversary. And so I said, that's a great idea. And so I ended up calling a bunch of alums from the surgical training program at the University of Rochester, and we put on a symposium where we said, let's look back 50 years. Let's take the textbook and let's take the original edition that was printed in 1969 and say, what is no longer true? And we gave each chapter to the surgeon, division leader of the surgeon, and said, take this chapter and tell us what's no longer true. As it turns out, 95% of the textbook was no longer true. It was, you know, the most common operation done in Strong operating room was a gastrectomy, removal of the stomach for ulcers. How many people had half their stomach taken out for a disease that we now know is an infectious disease that you can cure with antibiotics? Right? So the point that I'm trying to make is that what are they going to say 50 years from now when they look back and say, can you believe those guys were doing that? And that's what research is all about. And that's what Meliora is all about. It's ever better. We look at this and say, okay, what bugged me about that today? What could be done better? Why, you know, does that operation have to have an incision from here? Could it be done for an incision like that? Is there a gene therapy for that? Is there a better treatment for that? Is there a way to cure juvenile diabetes? And that's what every faculty member walks through the halls every day thinking, what bugged you today? What could we do better? And never, ever settle for the status quo, never rest on the laurels. And that was something that Cy taught me, and it was really interesting because Cy is this iconic figure, and he's telling me, he's this revered professor in all of surgery, and he's saying, you shouldn't believe what I'm telling you. You should question it. You should take it to the next level. You should study it. And so that's what the medical center is all about. It's world-class clinical care. It's educating the next generation of leaders. And that's a really important part. And that's another thing I learned through Cy's death, because we had a memorial service for him, and everybody came back from all over the country. Even people from all over the world came back. And this is, I mean, these are real luminaries in academic medicine. It was Craig Smith, who's the chair of surgery at Columbia Presbyterian. It was Ed Miller, who was the CEO, dean of Hopkins. It's Phil Pizzo, who was the dean of Stanford. It was Jack Rowe, who was the dean CEO of NYU and Mount Sinai, and then went on to become the CEO of Aetna. It was Cindy Shortell, who was the chief of vascular surgery at Duke. It was a whole list of absolute luminaries in American healthcare, all of whom trained at the University of Rochester. And what I learned from that experience, there was a reception after, Lynn, I'm sure you remember it well, and the reception afterward, everybody came up to me and said, the experience that I had at the University of Rochester was so transformative to my life, and it made me what I am today. And these are like luminaries that I revere coming up and talking about the University of Rochester. It was really good for me to hear that because I'm not an alumnus of the University of Rochester, and I didn't appreciate it until that day, what a special place this is. So I want to talk to you about some recent updates at the medical center. The first thing I want to note, and I hope you've all noticed it, and if you didn't on your drive after this, drive down Elmwood and you will see a 21-story crane in front of the hospital. And we are so excited about that. And any of you who have ever been to our emergency room with the 70 stretchers in the hallways and no place for patients, I think we'll be very glad to know that we're working hard on this building, which will triple the size of the emergency room. It's going to add more operating room space, private rooms for patients, and it's long overdue. So we finally have a crane. You're going to start to see steel going up, and we're so excited about that. And that's been 10, I don't know when you started planning that building, Mark, but it was probably at least 10 years ago. So to be able to see that going up is fantastic. There's other capital needs that are in the plan. You know, Ellie Alive isn't here, the dean of the dental school, but there's a huge issue with workforce and dentistry, and building a school and starting a school for general dentistry. We have a dental school, but it's really kind of a graduate school, and we're not training general dentists, which is really where the need is, and Ellie wants to do that. We have plans to build an RNA and cancer research building. You've probably heard recently about the large philanthropic gift from Tom Golisano to build the Intellectual and Developmental Disease Research Center, which is really exciting, is to have co-localization of all these services for both children and adults. It includes medicine, it includes pediatric behavioral medicine, it includes dentistry, so that it'll be one-stop shopping for this vulnerable population, and something that the community really needs. We're planning an addition onto the Children's Hospital, and that's sorely needed too. The Children's Hospital, you know, we build these buildings and we cut the ribbon, and then all of a sudden they're full like within a couple months, and we say, how did we ever live without this? So there's a big campaign in place to add more floors to the Children's Hospital. The tower, which I said is the emergency room, there's a phase 2 and a phase 3 of that, which will add services as we continue. But we're focusing first on that emergency room, because you know, one thing is we're blessed with a relentless demand for our services. And today, this morning on the meeting, Strong is licensed for, I think, 860 beds, and we typically have over 1,000 patients, sometimes coming close to 1,100 patients in an 860-bed hospital. Same thing at Highland, 260 beds, there'll be 300 patients. And so we've been really trying to manage that very large demand for clinical services. That will continue. Because if you think about it, as the baby boom demographic starts to age, the biggest risk factor for needing hospital services is age, and we're seeing more and more people requiring hospital services, and so the demand will continue. And it's been a challenge too, because we've been seeing this increasing demand with all kinds of workforce problems, with nursing shortages, with labor shortages in the hospital. So being able to balance that's been a real challenge, and I got to hand it to the staff, and the nursing staff was really the heroes in the COVID pandemic and the aftermath afterwards for getting us through that. We've had a lot of really good news this summer with respect to research. The Department of Cardiology over the last 3 months was the recipient of 3 PCORI grants. PCORI is patient-centered outcome research, and it's typically large clinical trials that are multi-center trials throughout the country that will be based and centered here. 3 grants for a total of $71 million in research grants to do 3 very large-scale national trials in cardiology. we have a lot of strength in aging research, and that's really bench to bedside, where we have everything starting at really trying to figure out molecular mechanisms of aging and the work that Vera Gorbanova and Andrei Selenov are doing, up to geriatric oncology clinics and the geriatric friendly hospital. So starting from molecule to healthcare delivery and even in the hospital, but then population health as well, looking at better ways to treat our geriatric population. It was mentioned about the cancer center, so we had the site visitors come. This is to get NCI designation as a national cancer center. That has been a 10-year project, and it has culminated in the recruitment of amazing, incredible scientists, translational scientists, clinicians. It's got 3 main research programs in it. It's got a large clinical trials infrastructure involved in it. And that has been a real focus, and it was a strategic decision that Mark made 10 years ago, saying we need to be an NCI-designated cancer center. And we just had the site visitors come from the NIH. We had a very good visit. We can't really say anything yet, but we've, I guess I can say that the champagne's chilling, but we can't pop the cork yet. But it was, and just going through the process of preparing that made us a much better cancer center. One of the things that we talked about is this concept of One Rochester, and it's actually kind of unique to have this world-class research-intensive academic medical center right next to a world-class research-intensive university. That doesn't happen everywhere. I mean, look at Cornell. The college is in Ithaca, and the medical center is in Manhattan. It's a little easier for me to get over to the River campus. And that proximity breeds opportunity for cross-campus collaboration, and it's been a real push and a vision from President Mengelsdorf to do that. And one of the interesting things is that last year the provost of the university said, we will fund some pilot grants about looking at institutions that we could build in the university, but one of the rules is it had to be multiple departments, multiple disciplines, like sort of trying to enhance team science. We were expecting to get, I don't know, Steve, what do you think we would get, 7 or 8 or 9 of those grants? That we got 49? 42, yeah. So, and they were just great ideas, and so, you know, what are some of the examples of how we can work together between the River campus and the medical center? We just had a great meeting just this morning about the Center for Human Health and Environment, and how the environment and the work that Paige Lawrence does in studying environmental effects on health, and that involves people from both campuses. I talked about the Institute of Aging, which is really basic biology to the geriatric-friendly hospital. We recently founded a transplant institute to look at some of the clinical issues around the delivery of transplant care, but in the next iteration of that is more research, and transplant research can be anything to understanding basic immunology of rejection of organs to policy and how you allocate organs. And so there's expertise on both sides of the street to look at problems like that. The exercise we went through, Tom is teaching us how to be good fundraisers. And we went through this exercise the other day with him and the president's senior leaders, and it's what they call the 5-finger approach, when you're making a pitch of why you know, you should invest in us. And so it's pretty simple. 1, where are you going? That's what you're asking me. Tell me your vision. Number 2, why is that important? Number 3, why is University of Rochester uniquely situated to do this? Number 4, what are we going to do? And number 5, how can you help? How can the donors help? And so we were, at least Lisa Kitko was there, we went through this process, and we all got to, like, you know, we had this like elevator thing, like, what are you going to pitch? And so we were sort of practicing. And so the most interesting thing of that process was the easiest question was always, why Rochester? Why are we uniquely suited to do something like this? And it gets down to this concept of One Rochester, where we can collaborate together break down any barriers that we've had around research or solving problems. And so the example that I gave was AI, so applied AI in healthcare. Why is that important? Well, AI is fundamentally going to change the way we deliver healthcare. Think about it. 30 years ago, we had the web browser, right? What's the web browser? It was the free, instantaneous, and scalable transfer of information. Changed our lives, right? I mean, I can think back to when I was a resident. George, you remember this. Like, you couldn't, to write a paper, you had to go to the library, climb through the stacks, find 1 million articles, photocopy them. I mean, think of the efficiency in what the browser brought to us. So AI is the free, instantaneous, and scalable transfer of knowledge. So think about that. And there's no way that that's not going to fundamentally change the way we do things in the next 10 years. This next 10 years is going to be the decade of data. So why is that important? Well, I say to my faculty when I'm talking to them, think about, it's going back to Cy, what bothered you today? What don't you like about the status quo? I said to the faculty, think about a case use for AI. Think about something that bothered you. Come tell me about it. And of course, everybody can think of 10 case uses for AI. A third of the data in the world sits in the electronic health record. It's not structured. It comes from multiple different places. It's potentially contextual. So like I could say one thing and Mark could say the same thing and we mean something different, or we could describe the problem in a different way. And so AI, through the large language models, allows you to extract that data, to edit it. And wouldn't it be great if all that data that's sitting there unqueried, we could extract it, we could edit it, and we could give it to the doctor sitting there with the patient in the clinic and help them make a very informed decision about care that was accurate, precise, whether that's risk of disease, whether it's prevention of disease, whether it's a treatment that's going to work or not work. And so we're going to see astronomical changes in our outcomes and our effectiveness because of AI. One of the things that when we started kind of innovating and implementing in AI, we've got this health lab team that does this full-time. It's a very exciting group of people. They're really thinking. They're incredibly smart and innovative. And what they focused on, the first thing they focused on was our staff during the pandemic. So they built this thing called Dr. Chatbot, which allowed us to screen our staff to make sure that people knew when they could come to work, when they couldn't, when they could be released back. So it was just a management tool to deal with the pandemic. They created that in a day and a half. What they did is they open sourced it. They said, like, this is an important tool. We're just going to give it to anybody that wants it. And then we found out that someone took it from the open source and they patented it and were selling it. But the point is like that was the common good smart team looking at a simple thing like managing the staff during a pandemic. The next thing that they kind of focused on was physician and provider enablement tools. And so one of the kind of hot areas right now that we've been beta testing and rolling out is what we call ambient documentation. And what that means is that the patient and the doctor in the room, they're having a discussion. That gets recorded. AI can extract the important information and write the note for the doc, so they just have to go in and edit and add. And so one of the things that we learned when we were looking at the pandemic and burnout of the faculty is that everybody was going home and spending 2-3 hours at night in the medical record trying to catch up from the patients that they had taken care of. And this is a total game changer. So, and the other thing I like about it is you've probably had the experience where you go to the doc and the doc's sitting there typing and looking at the computer. And if we don't have to do that and we can look you, the patient, in the eye, that human contact, that's why I became a doctor, that human contact. I didn't become a doctor to type into a computer. In fact, I wish I took typing when I was in high school because... So it's just, so that's the why. It's going to physician enablement, better patient care, be able to predict and prevent disease. There's no question. Why Rochester? We've got this health lab with these guys that are thinking applied AI. What clinical problem am I trying to solve today? And then you go over to the Gergen Data Center, and it's the guys that are actually writing the algorithms for the large language models. I mean, that's a match made in heaven, right? So what do we need to do that? Well, we need a lot of computing power. That's an issue that probably too much computing power if you're worried about climate change. But that's a problem that people are working on too. Instead of large language models? Do you go to smaller language models? Because right now, AI is the whole internet, but really what we need is the electronic health record and other data sources in the data file annotated to clinical outcomes, and so it's not the kind of energy use if you do it that way. We need probably a chief AI officer at the university. We need training programs so that we get the best and the brightest data scientists from the Gergen School to come over to the medical school and help us solve some of these clinical problems. So you can really be bold and think big and be the leaders in this change and this transformation. We know it's coming. That's where the puck is going. And then question 5, how can you help? I mean, you're here because you're helping. I think that I'll bet on this group of alums and friends to help us be the ones that lead this effort. And what do we have, like 11 of these 5 fingers, Lisa, in this exercise? And each one was better than the other. I thought mine was best, but but yours was excellent, and Ellie's. And then I was leaving, I was walking back over to the medical campus, and I could think of like 7 other things, like the NeuroHealth Institute, of course, like we've got this tsunami coming with movement disorder, Alzheimer's, and the aging population. We don't have good solutions. So, I mean, I could sit up here and just talk about probably 20 of these things. And you got to be a little careful because you have to, my job is to prioritize, like, what are we going to invest in? Because you can't boil the ocean. But there's so much possibility, might say boundless possibilities, right, Tom? In terms of what we can do together. So I think I'll stop there because I wanted to give an opportunity for you all to ask me some questions. But thanks for inviting me here today. It's a wonderful society. And it's good to be in a room of people that really take their legacy seriously, and I'm indebted to you for your dedication to us. Thanks. I think there's a microphone going around if somebody wants to ask any questions.
It's on. I'm going to be the guinea pig. Can you speak a little bit, so you've talked about the collaborative environment for creating this knowledge and creating new directions and new initiatives. Is there a collaborative environment for taking some of that knowledge and initiative and turning it into businesses in the Rochester area?
That's a really good question because, sort of the old way of, because one of the things you want to do is take your intellectual property, monetize it, and use it as a way to support the academic mission. It's very important because the way that we always did this at the Academic Medical Center is that you had a big margin on the clinical care, and you took that and you transferred it and reinvested it in education and in research. And that margin is getting harder and harder because of the health winds and the headwinds in healthcare economics. For example, just probably 10 years ago, 50% of our payers were government and the other 50% was commercial. That's not the case anymore with the aging of the demographic of the baby boom, with some of the changes that have happened. We rely, 70% of our payment comes from the federal government. With those payments, you typically lose money. With the commercial payers, you make money, and that's how you make the math work. So that has changed. And then, the other thing too is our cost of labor has gone up pretty dramatically with traveling nurses, with the inflation. Our cost of labor, if you look at it in the last 3 years, has gone up 33%. We go to the payers and say, hey, our cost of labor went up 33%. How about increasing your rates 33%? We can't just raise our prices. And so we're sort of stuck there, and we have to come up with creative solutions how to do that. And what you're describing is one of those creative solutions. And so if you look at this consortium that we're building with AI, with a couple of other universities and academic medical centers, what you do is if you have something that either, sometimes it's already there in the electronic health record, you use that. If not, you look for best in class, which is usually a small upstart company trying to build something, and then you partner with them. And when you partner with them, you say, okay, we'll help you do this. We've got all of the annotated patient information, the health record. We think it's a good idea. How about we have some equity interest in the company so that when the company is successful and it gets sold, then we get that back. The old way of doing that was just royalties from research discovery. So, and Rochester did pretty well with that. If you look at the HPV vaccine, the first vaccine ever known to prevent cancer, We got royalties from that for years, and those are significant. That was a significant source of income that doesn't exist anymore. And so I think of the concept of instead of inside out, like, oh, we've developed this drug, we've done the trial, it's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. To get to a phase 3 trial, you're talking about a $20 million, probably 10-year investment to get FDA indication for the new drug developed here. So that's not, I think there's more promise in this outside in, saying we need partnerships. We partner with smaller upstart companies, and we negotiate ownership or equity stake in that company. We help them build it, and then it gets sold, and then the revenue comes back. So that is a way to monetize our intellectual property that I think is different and changing and evolving. Some universities have a venture fund, so where you can either invest in your own good and patented intellectual property or in those kind of partnerships. So then you bring investment to the table as well as ideas. That's probably even better because you're a stronger negotiating position of say, we want to partner with you and we can throw, $10 million into this company. So anybody in the room wants to start a venture fund, come see me. But it's a really good question, yeah. Mary Ellen? She's got a mic right behind you, Mary Ellen.
Can you identify one thing that's been the most difficult for you in trying to attract talent to Rochester?
It actually, honestly, hasn't been difficult to attract talent to Rochester. And when I moved here, everybody told me that it was. And I heard over and over again, you can't get people to come to Rochester unless they have some connection here, they have some family here, and that is not true at all. And in surgery, I recruited people from all over the world. And I think they're all still here. Like, people get here, and especially the easy recruit is kind of the family with young kids. They come, they see the benefits of this area. And so I think there's a little bit, it kind of drives me a little crazy, this like inferiority complex about Rochester. Oh, the weather's not that great, and Kodak used to be here. I mean, it's not hard to recruit talented people here. And I think Steve would say the same thing on the science side, Lisa on the nursing side. And if you look at the students we're recruiting. So sometimes it's, if it's somebody and their partner has a job that just, if they're a Broadway set designer, it may be hard to recruit the scientist married to the Broadway set designer to Rochester. So sometimes a dual career couple can derail a recruitment, but it's not hard. But you got to resource it, and that's one of the reasons why. I think every division chief at the medical center should be an endowed chair, and that's not the case. For a department of surgery that's 100 years old, we don't have enough endowed chairs for me to. So that helps you get them here. It also helps you keep them here. So those kind of things where you can say, okay, we've got this endowed chair for you, which comes from the endowment, puts off money that supports your research and supports what you want to do. So I actually don't think it's hard to recruit people here.
I was impressed at the cardiac panel that you had the other day.
Yeah.
About the collegiality that there is.
Yeah.
That seemed like a very important thing.
It is, and it's, I came from Boston and then New York, hyper-competitive environments. It's like for every patient that needs an operation, there's 4 surgeons fighting over it's just, Rochester's never been like that. There's plenty of work for everybody. Everybody cares about the patients in this community. And an example I like to give is when we had that crowd strike thing a couple months ago where every computer in the place went down. Even RGH called us and said, can we send our IT people over to help you because we know you just lost 20,000 computers on a Friday morning when you're trying to when you're trying to operate on people and get people to a clinic. So that kind of shows you the kind of collaboration we have. The competitor across town is calling us in a crisis and saying, how can we help you? And we do the same for them if there's issues where they can't cover service and they need our help. So it's a very unique place. And some of it comes from it not being a hyper-competitive environment because there's plenty of work for everybody and we're all probably overworked. But it's something about the spirit of the place that's, and I don't know if that goes back to the biopsychosocial model and it's baked into the institution where we got to look after everything, not just the biological problem in front of us. I don't know, but it was very striking to me when I first came here. that collaboration. And they were right. You know, we've been hanging out a lot together this week, Mary Ellen. It was Peter Knight, Mike Stoner, Peter Knight's chief of cardiac surgery, Mike Stoner, chief of vascular surgery, and Spencer Zero, the chief of cardiology. And a lot of places you see that because a lot of the places what used to be a surgical procedure, the cardiologists do it minimally invasively, and there's all of this, you know, they're all trying to kill each other. We have just the opposite of that here. They get together and say, okay, start with the core value, which is the best care for the patient, and then we'll figure out how we're going to take care of the patient. And it's unique, and it's something that I'm very proud of.
My husband passed away from pancreatic cancer 10 years ago. And I'm interested in knowing what the current state of the art is in pancreatic cancer research.
Yep.
And secondly, it's a two-part question. The second part is, how do you go about translating or diversifying into general medical care findings from research,
Yeah.
the bench to bedside, particularly in community hospitals, which are not directly affiliated with research institutions?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I'm sorry to hear about your husband. I've been researching and taking care of pancreatic cancer patients for my entire career. And, you know, we've made some improvement. The problem with the disease is, as I'm sure you're aware, is that most people, by the time it's diagnosed, it's already spread. So most of the pancreatic cancers never make it to see the surgeon for resection. But even in the ones that do, we put them to surgery, chemotherapy, sometimes radiation therapy, and it's a very high chance that it will come back afterwards. There's some good news in terms of improvement because the 5-year survival for pancreatic cancer, even when I started and came to Rochester 10 years ago, was about 5%. It's now 12%. So it's improved, but that's 12% is not good enough, right? And so, so what do we need? We need clinical trials, and actually I think that's a huge strength here. In fact, there's two clinical trials, one about to open, two are open, one's about to open. Investigator-initiated trials based on science done here at Wilmot that are now being translated to human patients, one of which I'm really excited about because if you look at the preclinical, we do this all, we test it in a mouse model first and then do toxicity studies and then have to apply to the FDA and then get the drug. But so that's what we need. We need pancreatic cancer patients to participate in clinical trials because if we just do these standard therapies with these poor results, we're going to be stuck with that. So that's one of the things that I talk to. And when you talk to pancreatic cancer patients, they completely get it. They're willing to participate in clinical trials. They understand that it's risk and it's not proven, but they're thinking like, and I tell my pancreatic cancer patients, like, I don't know if this is going to help you. If I knew it was going to help you, it wouldn't be a clinical trial. I don't think it's going to hurt you. And it will definitely help somebody else with this disease down the line because we'll either know that it worked or we'll know that it didn't work and then move on to something else. And I've never had a pancreatic cancer patient say to me, I don't want to participate, or I don't want you to keep my tumor to study the biopsy because, so they understand what they're up against, they're willing to take risk, and they want to improve care, which is pretty benevolent when you think about it. Someone's dealing with a problem like that and they're thinking about helping other people with the disease. And that's been my experience across the board with pancreatic cancer patients. Your question about how do you disseminate the care, because if it's only something you can get at the NIH or Memorial Sloan Kettering, that's a problem. There's a good example of that at Memorial Sloan Kettering right now where they take the tumor, immediately gene sequence it, develop a vaccine that's very specific to the patient's tumor, and then give it back to them after the surgery. That's something that's hard to scale across multiple places because you gotta sequence it, you gotta make the vaccine in this very short time frame, and you can't do that at FF Thompson in Canandaigua or at one of our affiliate hospitals. And so how do you, I'm not saying we shouldn't implement that's really interesting science and we should do trials like that, but the ones that are going to have the biggest impact are the ones that actually can be disseminated. And when I write an NIH grant for a pancreatic cancer therapy that I want to develop, that's one of the biggest things you get graded on, significance and impact. So if it's something that's going to be wildly expensive, only relevant to a few people, and not scalable and disseminatable, then you won't get the grant. So, but it is a challenge because even for clinical trials, like I would love it if we could do cancer trials in all 8 of our affiliate hospitals. We just can't because you need the clinical trial staff, you need all of the enhanced monitoring, and so we open trials at specific places and can't do it everywhere. But the idea would, if you could, it would be great, because then the patient doesn't have to travel 2.5 hours to Wilmot here to get that therapy. There are examples of clinical trials where we can do that, simpler ones, oral drugs, not first in man, so not as worried about side effects if it's been, say the drug's been used for another indication in patients and we know all the safety and toxicity profile of it. That it's an oral drug, I can do that trial anywhere. But it's an important question, and I when I look at these ones that will never be widely disseminated, I kind of think that the NIH should spend the money on things that are more likely to be significant and impactful. All right, I'm getting the time's up, and I get the, so one last question. She's bringing the mic over so everybody can hear you.
Hi. I was speaking with someone in the Department of Psychiatry, and they have a psychiatrist from Toronto who's now kind of commuting because he has a couple of kids and he cannot find a house in Rochester.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can get all the people you want, but it's tough.
It is. Housing is a big problem in Rochester. And I was actually just talking to the mayor, Malik Evans, about that in terms of, I mean, they're trying to build housing, but it's, I've seen this with recruits that we've brought here where they go out to try to get a house and there's like 10 offers, half of them are cash offers with inspections waived because the market is like that. So housing is an issue that we have to deal with, and it's not just Rochester. I mean, my son lives in Maine, and it's the same thing. I mean, he was trying to buy a house, a young person trying to buy a house, and it was virtually impossible because he was competing with cash offers and multiple offers, and so this is a nationwide problem with the housing shortage, and we need creative solutions to that. I don't know that I have them, but there's probably some real estate developers sitting in the room, so maybe we should ask them. All right, well, thank you very much. It was great to be here with you this afternoon.